Welcome to the Andy Staples Show. Very special edition, special guest. We got Shane Beamer, the head coach of the South Carolina Gamecocks, signer of 5 stars, beater of Clemson. These are things that are pretty huge considering where this program was when you took it over. Shane, what's life like in Columbia these days?
Life is good. Thanks for having me on. You're kind to say that. A lot of great moments here in the last few months for sure, on the field and off the field as well. And testament about what Gamecock football can be and where we're going. A lot of work to do, but there's a lot of excitement and a lot of energy here in our facility and outside the facility as well.
Shane, when you got there, I'm assuming that signing 5-star prospects and beating Clemson were on your list, right? Which one did you think would be more daunting?
Good question. I'm not trying to dodge the answer. I really didn't think about it that way. I mean, I know it's cliche, but for me, it really was just knowing that we had a lot of work to do. And let's get to work and let's just try and from the day one when I got here, let's just try and be the very best we can be as a program, and let's get better each day as a program. Let's recruit our butts off. Let's coach our butts off. And both knew that both of those were attainable. We had shown that we could do that. We did it in the past when I was here as an assistant coach, and now we just needed to get back to doing it. And the only way to get back to doing that was to get to work, and that's what we did.
So we'll get to the on-field stuff in a minute, because I do want to ask you about especially that late season surge and Spencer Rattler and all of the things that you guys did at the end of last season. But you just signed Nicholas Harper, who's a player out of the Washington, D.C. area. If you follow recruiting, you know exactly who that is. I remember the first time I saw him, I think he was a sophomore in high school. Somebody had posted one of his track races on my timeline, and he was running the 200. And it's this dude who looks like a college defensive end running his track people and destroying them. And he had to be the most interesting recruit in this class. 5-star guy, don't really know exactly what position he's going to be. Dad is a NASA engineer, former pro soccer player. Mom's a pharmacist. Like this, what was that recruitment like?
Amazing. And he's got a great family, like you just said, Andy. And that first time I saw him was very similar to your experience. I was coaching at Oklahoma, and I recruited the D.C. area for us. So, Caleb Williams' high school's kind of right down the street, essentially, from Nicholas's school. So I would go to Caleb's school in the morning, first thing at like 7 a.m. at Gonzaga, and then head up to Archbishop Carroll, where Nicholas was, because at the time we were recruiting an offensive tackle at Oklahoma, Anton Harrison, who is finishing up at Oklahoma and is entering the NFL draft. And I was there visiting Anton, and Coach Harris, Robert Harris, the head coach there at Archbishop Carroll, he told me, he said, "Hey, I want you to take a look at this." I guess he would have been a freshman that I've got. Let me tell you, see what you think. And he showed me his track video, and I don't know much about track, but I sat there and watched this race of Nicholas at a young age. And I remember saying, like, "Oh my God, you telling me this kid plays football?" And then he showed him to me in the school, and then you see the size. So right away, you're blown away with it from a physical standpoint. But then as you get to know him and his skill set, obviously in football and track, but how just the great personality he has, his family, just how athletic they are. It's a fascinating family. He's a great student. I was looking at his updated grades yesterday. He's close to a 4.0, wants to go to med school. I mean, he's got so many great things going for him. And it was a unique recruitment just because of, one, how talented he is on the track and on the football field. Obviously, because of that, he's going to have a million schools after him, which he did. But then all the other things. I mean, you've got this guy can run in the Olympics one day. He could be a high draft pick one day, but he's a great young man that I told, like, I appreciated the opportunity to recruit him. He didn't change from the day that I first met him when I was at Oklahoma to when I talked to him this week. He's the same guy. That's a credit to, his parents, and he hasn't let everything go to his head, and he's got a lot of work to do, obviously. But he's a great young man with a great future here at Carolina.
What did change is potential position, because I heard you say on signing day you initially were looking at him as potentially a defensive end. Then it kind of shifted to tight end, and now it's more receiver. So for folks who don't know, he's 6'5", 225. And as I told Shane before we started recording, I went down a little rabbit hole of Calvin Johnson versus Usain Bolt physical dimension questions. Turns out they're the same person. So you might have found the third one.
What did you hope? If I did, that's good for us. That's for sure. But yeah, I mean, initially early on, I think Nicholas saw himself as a defensive end and rushing the passer, and he certainly can do that. And our defensive coaches aren't against that by any stretch of the imagination. But then as the recruiting process went, I think he, kind of started thinking more about the offensive side of the ball. And then that evolved more into just, being able to get him out in space. Yes, he could go in there and block, but are we really maximizing his abilities when he has that size, that athleticism, and that speed if he's in there blocking defensive ends a third of the game? Probably not. So let's get him out in space and let's use his speed and let's, make teams account for him in different ways. And don't get me wrong. I mean, we'll be creative with him and as he earns an opportunity to get onto the field, but he can certainly do a lot. And like I said a minute ago, he's got a lot of work to do, and he'll be the first to tell you that. And, nobody is anointing him as, anything from day one. He's going to come in here and work, but we're excited about his skill set and his potential.
This is a very bad at math podcast, but Andy, did you do like Calvin Johnson 40 times versus what it would be like if it were a 100-meter dash or whatever the races that he does?
So Calvin Johnson was a 4.3 guy at the combine. I think a 4.35 or something like that. Very similar to what Bolt would be if you broke it down. But I was looking at Bolt's 18-year-old track times. He's a little ahead of where Nick is, but not by much. I mean, Nick's 200 time the best 200 time he's run this year would, I think, put him in the finals of the NCAA championships. Wow. So it's pretty good. But that was the thing that amazed me is Bolt 6'5", ran at like 210. Calvin Johnson played at like 235, but if you made Bolt a football player, he would bulk up. And so they basically, or if you made Johnson a sprinter, he'd slim down. So it's a similar size and build, and it's wild. There are not many humans walking around like that.
I mean, do you literally hear what you're talking about? The fastest man on the face of the earth. And I also too, it's like so unique because when's the last time in this business for all three of us that you've heard of somebody saying, well, he could be a defensive end or
an Olympic sprinter.
Yeah. It's just
exactly.
Well, that's what you guys had experience seeing that sort of elite track speed. You played Texas A&M this year. Devon Achane is that, and also a great football player mixed in with it. So you've seen it, but he's the more traditional size you expect for that.
Yeah,
Nick is
more traditional size. You're usually talking about your slot receivers and people like that a little bit here.
Yeah.
It is. None of us have ever dealt with a guy with that size that can do the things that he can on the football field and the track.
Well, I think that, bringing up Nick is a pretty interesting segue because, when you look at the way that he's rated, obviously that is what you get when you're that big and can move that fast. But, we spoke on the phone. I don't know if you remember this last year after the Georgia game, because you became my personal hero that day because you're the first coach that has acknowledged the importance of athleticism and the correlation that it has with stars. They have stars everywhere is what you said, which we almost renamed the podcast, by the way.
I appreciate that.
But the
defensive lineman that runs better than anybody on this call, I think was
exactly
definitely better than me. The thing that I was wondering when you, and it's kind of maybe a little similar to the first question I asked you, but when you go to a place like South Carolina and you're playing in the conference that you're playing in, and you see the way that some of these teams that you're competing with on Saturdays are built, from the get-go before you even get there.
And you helped build that one. You were there.
So you know more than anybody what it takes to be situated that way from a talent standpoint. I've always wondered what it would be like to be like, I'm going to be the head coach of an SEC program now. Like, do you ever think about what it takes to get to a point where you're signing 15 top 100 players in a given cycle, or what it takes to consistently beat a team that is built that way? And like, is that like a thing that if you think about too much at the beginning, it gets to you? Or like, how do you approach that in terms of like the gap of where some of those teams are in this conference and where you're headed?
Yeah, no, great question. To me, it kind of goes back to what I said, earlier, just about staying. I know it's cliche, but just process and each and every day trying to be the very best we can be. And there's no question when I got hired. I mean, we had a lot of really good players here when I got hired, but we just didn't have enough of them, and we had major deficiencies at certain positions, and that wasn't going to solve itself. We had to go recruit, and we had to go find guys to bring in from the transfer portal or whatever it may be. And that's what we did, and that's what we continue to do. We've closed the gap. I mean, we went from getting embarrassed by Clemson at home my first year to beating Clemson at Clemson this past season. So we haven't arrived, but we've closed the gap, but we still have a ways to go as well. And we know that. And, we got to continue to build up our depth. And the only way I know to do that is just continue to recruit and just continue to add great class after great class after great class. And it's not hard to be, motivated from that standpoint. We feel great about the signing class that we just signed. I think it's the highest rated class we've had here in about 10 years. But all you have to do is just look at the rankings, and you see about 7 of the opponents that you play every single year up there ranked ahead of you too. So it gets into continuing to recruit. And then once you get them here, I talk to our staff about it all the time. Like, we've got to do a phenomenal job of developing our players once we get them in our program as well. Not just the heralded recruits like Nick, who we're talking about, but those guys that maybe aren't as heralded, or the walk-ons, or whoever it may be, where from 1 to however many guys we have on our roster, we have about 120 during the season. We're developing all 120, and that's how you continue to close that gap against those teams, in my opinion.
Well, and another way that you help close the gap is, you mentioned the transfer portal. You get Spencer Rattler out of there. You've told the story of Austin Stogner helped, just said, hey, have you thought about calling him?
Right.
And you get him there. Now, he developed quite a bit over the season. When did you really start to see him get comfortable in that offense?
I hate to say the Tennessee game, but I mean, the Tennessee game obviously was when it really took off.
Game 11. Yeah.
But, I think it was a process throughout the year, Andy, where we as coaches were continuing to try and make him comfortable, and he was getting comfortable. And, it's a lot of those guys he was throwing to and working with last year weren't here for spring practice. Austin Stogner wasn't. He was learning a new offense, and it takes time. And he'll be the first to tell you he didn't probably perform as well as maybe he wanted to at times, but he also wasn't, as bad as maybe some people made it out to be throughout the season as well. Like, a lot of those throws that you guys saw him make against Tennessee and Clemson, I had seen that all season long in practice. And, for whatever reason, it wasn't always transferring over to game day, but it wasn't like he was bad either. You don't start out 1-2 and then win, I think it was 5 in a row or 4 in a row, whatever we did, unless you got pretty good quarterback play. You don't go up to Kentucky and beat Kentucky and Lexington for the first time in 10 years without good quarterback play. You don't beat Texas A&M for the first time ever without good quarterback play, So we needed to be better around him, players and coaches. I think each week Spencer got more and more comfortable. I knew he was close throughout the year because, like I said, he did it in practice, but was really proud of the way that he's a great teammate and he's a great leader. And was really proud of him, of the way that he just continued to get better. And I'm so happy for him that he was able to have the success that he did, and our entire team, those last 2 games of the regular season.
Well, and then you get to that point, and it's not the deepest quarterback draft class in the world, and you've got this guy who's got a great arm and who had these incredible finish to the season. How hard do you have to work to make sure you get him back and you can kind of build on that?
Work. It was, I wish I could say it was easy or a slam dunk. No, it was a lot of work, but all along it was, wanting to make sure Spencer was doing what was right for Spencer and his family. And, from the time, we didn't really talk about it during the regular season. I got asked by our media, are you having these conversations with Spencer? And I wasn't. I wanted Spencer to focus on playing football, and he wanted to focus on playing football during the season. But then once the season was over, we met a couple times before the bowl game. I had a couple conversations with his dad before the bowl game. And then once the bowl game was over, obviously we talked, quite a bit and just trying to educate them on the process and where the NFL was with things and the pros and the cons and all that. And I didn't ever want him to, feel like he was pressured to come back or forced to come back. I wanted him to do what he wanted to do. And he wanted to come back, and for a lot of different reasons. And he's excited about that. And he's been awesome, since day one when he came back in January, of the way he's worked in the weight room and getting ready to start spring practice in March, and excited that he's here.
After that question, it's just getting a quarterback of that stature back is a win, right?
Yeah.
The two big wins that you get at the end of the year last year, on top of all the other ones you had, big win. Splash on signing day, getting a guy that, you could play at multiple positions and is the type of athlete we described as a win. It just seems like you have momentum in a lot of facets of this game right now in your program. How much does momentum come into play when you're building a program? And in that building, when you feel it, how is it different than it maybe was before you attained it?
Yeah, no, we do. We'd have a lot more if we had finished that bowl game better. I mean, that one still makes me, upset that we weren't able to finish off that game, and give credit to Coach Freeman, Notre Dame. They played great, but that one still hurts to not finish the season and send out those seniors on with a win. But there's no question the momentum is real. I feel it here in our facility. I feel it outside this facility when I go out in public and I'm at other sporting events, or I'm in Columbia somewhere or wherever. There's a lot of excitement about South Carolina football, a lot. And that is a good thing. But we also, I've got to do a great job as a coach of making sure our players understand that, we haven't arrived by any stretch of the imagination. It's a thin line, and we've got a lot of work to do. Now, we have confidence as a football team, and we should. We have a lot of excitement and expectations going into 2023, and we should. But we also need to realize that what happened last year, we just can't assume that it automatically happens in 2023. Like, you've got to go right back to work. There's so many new faces on this team that weren't even here in 2022. But certainly, this beats the alternative of 2021. At this time, I was most concerned about building up the confidence where our guys believed we could win football games and developing the depth at certain positions. And we've done a good job of that. Now, the hard thing is going to be to take the next step from where we are now to this next level that we're trying to get to.
So speaking of big wins, I have some video of another one of your bigger wins. Rumor had it that Nick Harper actually signed with you because you beat him in a race at one point. We found some video of a race where you're showing off your speed. So if you're watching on the YouTube version, you're going to see just Shane Beamer in all his glory. If you're listening on the podcast version, trust me, this is something to behold, and you'll have to go to the YouTube.
What's up, Nick? Coach Beamer here. I saw that viral video of your race last weekend in Myrtle Beach. You looked like a man among kids in that race. I thought to myself, you know what? I can look like a man among kids also.
Okay, so this is you taking first place in a 100-meter dash. Those are, I believe, are your children, and your dog. Is that some sort of doodle?
That is a miniature schnauzer. Is that right? Yeah, miniature schnauzer, mixed between a Snorky and a schnauzer, I think, or Snorky. Miniature schnauzer and a Snorky.
And what is the name of this pooch right here?
That is Boomer. So when we moved from Athens to Norman, Oklahoma,
nice.
In order to make it easier for the kids, we agreed to get them a dog. So hence the name Boomer. And little known fact, Andy, Boomer's sister actually belongs to Lincoln Riley out in California.
Wow. So, we've taken a tour of Boomer's sister's house in that case on the podcast. Now, I'm sure I'm not the first to tell you that if Boomer had stayed in Boomer's lane, Boomer would have beaten you.
No, you're exactly right. Boomer got distracted by my wife. My wife was standing to the side, and I think when he took off, he saw my wife and he veered off course. But I think he may have gotten me. Oh, and yes, that's my son wasn't in that video, so that's my two daughters, and then our deputy athletic director, Chance Miller. It was his son and his daughter. So his daughter was the one that's crying on the track because she fell and scraped her knee. So I'm like, man, I'm gonna get fired.
I was gonna say, I thought your kids were older than that. That's right.
So we recruited all the coaches' kids, but those were the only 4 that were brave enough to show up that day.
Well, the dog was my favorite part. I think
blazing speed of Boomer is very intimidating.
The Boomer speed is intimidating. Whatever it takes, but we have a lot of fun around here and just try to be creative and do something for Nicholas on that video was the intent behind that. And we had a good time, and certainly my competitive juices showed in that race.
So, you want to hit Shane with a would you rather? I think we're at that point in the broadcast.
Yeah, I'm just gonna. Can I just stick with my brand and I'll ask the serious
Absolutely.
One? Do it. You can do the one that you came up with.
Do it,
Shane. 2024 class. Would you rather have 3 5-star prospects atop that class or 10 4-stars?
Well, this is no disrespect to any 5-star that we're recruiting, so I don't. I'm saying that.
Please sign anyway.
I'm not saying I don't want you, but probably the 10. I don't know, probably 10 4-stars, just from a. Now if you said you're going to sign 3 5-stars and then nobody beyond that, it's very good. That's an easy answer. But, I think 10 4-stars, those are really, 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 really good players that you're developing some great depth at all positions and you're spreading it out. Hopefully those 10 4-stars are about 7 or 8 different positions that you've got those guys and you're making your whole team better.
All right, we got to reach into the big bag of grab ass for the last one to send you off properly. All right, here's the one I came up with. Would you rather have a pause button on your life or a rewind button on your life?
Probably pause. There's certainly things that like us all that I look back on in the past and wish I had done differently. I mean, I talked about the Notre Dame game. There's about 4 things in that Notre Dame game I'd love to rewind and go back and be able to do over again. But don't live in the past and always be looking forward and learn from.
But if you can pause on that tiger paw for a few more minutes,
that's what I was about to say. There's some great moments. I mean, I'm sitting here in my office right now. And on the wall right here on this wall to my left is some pictures that we've got up there from post-game celebrations from last season. So that's what it's all about in coaching, is being able to, celebrate on the field with fans and players and in the locker room after games. So certainly there's a lot of those moments that I would love to be able to pause and prolong a lot longer.
Well, you can pause on that video of you beating Boomer.
That's right.
But I don't like your chances in the rematch.
You're probably right.
Shane Bieber, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Keep up the great work.